Clear prop.
Star 73, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear Sutton. 1 Charlie Bravo, exit in runway 25, going 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and designated pilot examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I am fantastic as always. We have done, 80-something shows now, and we are on the precipice of somewhat repeating our most favorite show, or most listened to show. That was actually episode number 2, I think. Reflections on a instrument check ride. Well, today we're going to do reflections on a private pilot check ride, and I think probably by pilot mass alone, there's probably more people thinking about their private check ride than they are their instrument check ride. So hopefully this will be a highly sought after show, one that you share broadly on the interwebs, and we get millions of listens to this show as well. But before we start, I want to tell you a quick story, Wally. I had an experience last week of getting to ride, not fly, but ride in a B-17 out of Conroe Airport. It was something amazing. I think there's only 4 or 5 of those birds left, and I'll tell all the listeners, if you get a chance to do it, you should do it. It's not a cheap thing, but they need a lot of money to make those things stay in the air. It was a perfect day. Sky was clear, wasn't too windy, and those 4 engines rattled away and lifted off, and I was pretending to be a radio guy going to war, and they had machine guns and open holes everywhere. It was really, really something else. So if you get a chance, you've never got to do that, have you?
I have not done that. That's definitely on my bucket list. I mean, I've gotten to fly in a DC-3 several times, but that's been a long time. But I could just imagine the shakes, the rattles, the rolls, the smell of the 100 low lead combined with the hydraulic fluid, combined with the engine oil, combined with the whatever. I just can't. I mean, it sounds
Go back
like
in those days and think about gunpowder and all that stuff in there.
Yeah, and just all the young men, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that went to war.
There was a
machines.
24-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy that were part of this group that I flew with. And the guy that, it's an experience, and the guys that are volunteering to fly and do the cabin work, he said, look, this plane would have been full of people 2 years older than this young man, and the women that ferried the planes back in World War II were probably 2 years younger than this lady. So, and they looked like children to me, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The planes were full of kids back in those days, and it's amazing. It's an amazing beast. It's a lot of fun. If you get a chance, go fly in a B-17. It was a lot of fun for me. So let's jump into reflections of a private pilot check ride. And this is really from my perspective. Wally's a DPE and has given probably up to 600 check rides now. And I would say the large majority of those were private check rides, Wally.
Yeah, I would say a good 70% of it. And I'm looking at a slide right here. I just did some recurrent DPE training just a couple of days ago, and we actually don't have the data for the number of instrument ratings that were issued, but in 2021. I think these are the numbers from 2020 and 2021. Each year there were close to, one year was 55,734 private pilot certificates issued, and the other year was 53,011. So, 53 to 56,000 private pilot check rides over the last couple of years, each year.
Wow. And assuming it's between 80 and 90% pass rate, that means there were probably more like 60,000 or 62,000 check rides administered.
Yeah, and as I look at this, I don't know if this is check rides or certificates issued as I really dig into
Still,
it.
it's a big number. That's
right.
thousands. That's what is that? That's about 250 a day. They're happening, 250 check rides a day.
Wow.
Hopefully people are sharing this podcast and everybody's getting a little bit better and a little bit closer to their certificate.
Yeah.
So as I reflect back on my private check ride, boy, I had a very different vision and plan about what my aviation career was going to be. I figured I was going to stop at private, not do any more but fun flying with my wife and maybe go see my kids at college. And while I took it serious, I think people take a different approach if you're planning to be an airline pilot versus stopping at private, which I don't think is bad, but the pace at which I went, the approach I took to some of the emergency type things, I took them all very seriously, but I don't think that I really ever thought that I would have to interact with any of that stuff because my personal minimums were going to be so freaking strict. It wasn't funny. I was only going to fly on perfectly clear, calm days. But boy, did things change over time as well. Obviously, I own a flight school now. So as I look back and I think about leading up to that day, it was a big day for me. I didn't want to fail. You want to succeed. You want others to know you succeeded. You want that certificate, and you kind of want the training to end. Like you want the validation that you are good enough to fly.
Right.
And you were not my DPE that day. I had a DPE that I think he was a great guy, super fair, but he would probably carry a presence of stern, ex-military man. You know, it was a little bit of an intimidation factor knowing that I was going to be doing my check ride with this gentleman. And so I think as the days got closer, my insecurities started kicking in, and I started, I'm not ready. I have to do more work. And whether that was true, I don't really know back in those days, but I kept wanting to do one more ground with my instructor, one more ground. I kept thinking I just wasn't there. And I think we'll talk about some changes or best practices, but hindsight being 2020, I don't think I was book smart enough when I took my check ride, but I was really good with the stick and rudder stuff. I think we did a bunch of flying, a bunch of landing, a bunch of maneuvering, and I still think there's a little bit of that today that goes on. Everyone's really worried about the flying, and I think really the book work's probably more important. Even if you're just going to stop at private, I think you need to think more about the book work. I don't want to blow our thunder at the end, but first reflection on that, Wally, as a DPE, do you think the collective 55,000 check rides that occurred had more issues with stick and rudder skills or aeronautical knowledge and decision-making skills?
Definitely the latter, in my opinion. Most people do fine on steep turns. They do fine on stalls. For the most part, they do a pretty good job. It's when you ask them to make decisions that you see some indecisiveness. And that can go back to the flight training. It can be as easy as, okay, we sit down before we even start the check ride, and we discuss the weather. Okay, well, what do you think of the weather that is forecast for 2 hours from now or 2.5 hours from now? And you can see the applicant wants me to say it's going to be too windy, we shouldn't fly. And
do people ask you if you should go or shouldn't go? Does that happen?
Yeah, they do, and I tell them that they're pilot command, it's their call.
Yeah, and I think that's a great practical thing for both students and instructors. As the flight school owner now, I consider that a flaw in some of the training. If a student asks that question, we haven't been doing our job good enough to let that student learn that they need to make decisions like their pilot in command.
Right.
We probably get too busy and we just want to go, and the instructor knows they were just out there, probably knows that it's XYZ weather conditions, XYZ wind conditions, and they're saying, let's go, and that we're taking some of that decision making away from that pilot for sure.
Right.
Don't ask your DP if you should go, though. If you're listening to this, that's a good tip for the reflections of a private pilot check ride.
Yeah, and as I would say, I will say this. I mean, I think I'm speaking for every examiner that I know fairly well, and I could say there's probably 15 examiners that I think that I know fairly well. I guarantee all 15 of those are your number one cheerleader. We're rooting for you. We want you to do well, and there's nothing more that feels better than walking out and just telling someone, "But boy, that was a really good job. Maybe you could, brush up on this and make yourself even better." But you want to walk away with a successful check ride, so your examiner is rooting for you. You don't ever think the examiner. I don't know of any examiner that would be, out to get somebody or want to call a check ride unsatisfactory.
That's good to hear, for sure. I bet the listeners appreciate that and want to hear that as well. I think, so we're still talking about leading up to that day, right? One more ground, one more flight. You're almost kind of cramming, or I felt like I was cramming because I wanted to be perfect. Are you expecting perfection as a DP?
No, you don't. You don't have to be perfect, and that's part of the briefing. You're going to make mistakes. And part of what I'm looking for is how you manage those mistakes, how you recover from the mistakes. And, you can't, I say pout. You can't pout over a mistake. You made a mistake. Okay, let's move on. There's no rearview mirror. A quarterback throws the ball to the opposite team. He now becomes a defensive back and needs to go tackle the guy, go to the sideline, regroup, figure out what you did wrong, and then come back next time and don't throw it to the guy wearing the other colored uniform.
Yeah, that's exactly how we should react. And so if you're going to make mistakes, or you're going to make mistakes, just be ready to adjust and overcome. The way you can prevent from making a whole bunch of mistakes, though, is to do that mock check ride, right? And have that experience of everything you're going to do. While you probably don't know this, but flight schools probably keep a gouge of what you've done on the last few check rides. I know this is a new piece of information for you. So I think at times people probably depend on those gouges a little too much. And I'm sure you change your plan of attack on a regular basis.
Yeah, I try to, and I'll let you in on a little secret. I was giving a check ride to a young man yesterday, who was he's a CFI. He was getting his multi-engine rating, and he had told me that he had done his CFI check ride with a particular examiner, who is an examiner who my daughter is going to take a check ride with, and I was so tempted to say to him,
"Do you have a gouge?
What'd you have to do?" But I didn't. I bit my tongue. I wanted to say that. I wanted to say that so bad. So I'm not stupid. I know as soon as the door shuts in my car, the CFIs are descending on the applicant, going, "What do you have you do today?" Word is probably out that there's certain things that I think are important, and I'm gonna focus on, and that's okay. That's good.
Yeah, so whether you have that gouge or not, you probably should do a mock check ride. You should probably try some things that aren't there. We talked about it in my Reflections of an Instrument check ride. And you may not remember, I remember clear as day, you made me do a partial panel VOR approach, and I had never done that. I had always assumed, and I think every CFI here assumed, it would always be a GPS approach that you did a partial panel on, and those were much easier because I had practiced them. But when you told me, I didn't say, "Hey man, I've never done this. Can we do a partial panel GPS approach?" I had to think and use my brain, and luckily I got through it. But it's probably because I'd been trained well. So I think if in the mock check ride, don't just follow a gouge, do some other things. I think we followed the gouge that I had on my check ride from my DP so much that I got some bad habits, and we did some touch and goes I had a flight plan that, of course, my CFI helped me with. We knew we were going right over an airport just southwest of here that no longer exists. And we assumed that my engine was going to get pulled over that because this examiner had done that 72 out of 73 flights before that. So what do? We go practice that route 40 times probably before my check ride. And what my instructor did was we would land from the emergency, we would put the flaps up, and we would take off and go. And so of course, we take off from here. We're heading that direction, and lo and behold, my engine gets pulled over that field. And I do all the things I'd practiced and tried to restart the engine, follow the checklist. Was a studious student, did really good. And we hit the runway on target, did everything good. I reached over, put the flaps up, pulled full power in, and the DP lost it. He was not happy. He was not wanting me to take back off again. And he said he didn't tell me to take back off again. What am I doing? The maneuver was an emergency landing from a engine out scenario. And I was taken aback. I didn't know what to do because we'd always done touch and goes. I had actually never taxied back at that airport because they didn't have taxiways.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know honestly, I didn't know what to do.
Right.
He's like, we're doing a full stop and going to taxi back and take off again because we're going to do a short field takeoff. I didn't know what to do on a single piece of concrete runway that I had never taxied on. So that's where that gouge and that practice probably got me in trouble a little bit. And you might want to try it multiple ways if you have an instructor in those scenarios that the gouge is saying, this is where you're going to do this exercise. Make sure you really understand the intentions of those exercises and those maneuvers.
Yeah, yeah. So many times people, it seems to happen more on instrument check rides. I may get a call or a text or an email a few days before the check ride, and they say, I'm just trying to do my due diligence. What 3 approaches can I expect on my check ride in a few days? And I'll say, I say, look, I'm not trying to be difficult about this, but there are so many variables. The wind is a huge variable. Inoperative equipment is the glide slope at Sugarland in op, so we can't do an ILS there.
Localizer here got taken out by a plane not too long ago, right?
Exactly. There's so many variables, and even as we brief before we go get in the airplane, I'll say, okay, the plan is that we're going to go to this airport and do approach A, and then go to this airport and do approach B, and then do approach C. But that may change between now and an hour from now, just based on wind, based on air traffic control. So you've got to be able to adjust. You just and that's real world. That is real world flying. We can take off and expect that we're going to do ILS 25 left in Los Angeles, but by the time we get out there, the 25 left may be closed and it's 24 right.
Yeah.
Okay, you just change it.
Yeah, don't fall in love with the plan because the plan may change. The other piece, again, leading up to the day of, that I don't think I did a good job of, and I guess that means my instructor didn't do a great job necessarily of preparing me, was really understanding the maintenance logbooks and maybe my logbook. We had gone through some exercise. I think I was a 68-hour private pilot check ride student applicant. And so we knew I'd flown enough, and I had this instructor really post solo. So he had known, well, we did the night landings, we did the night cross country, we'd done the other cross countries. I could show that I had all my solo time in my logbook. So the logbook audit was a short snippet of time, and there's not a whole lot of requirements. But I wish I would have done a better job of knowing those myself and not necessarily believing that he had checked and did all those things. So I would, hindsight again, I would have a logbook audit form of some sort that had the regulations, that had the line items in my logbook that met those regulations, and be very confident when being asked, show me where you did the night landings, that I did the night landings, that I did the long cross country at night, or the night cross country. Have those things lined out. That would make you probably go in a little bit more at ease, and probably help the examiner. And question for you, Wally, if a student sits down and I'll say their logbooks kind of hanging out of their flight bag, and the cables from their headsets hanging out of their flight bag, and they have a broken pencil in their hand, and they're disheveled. Maybe their buttons aren't tied up just exactly right, or maybe their buttons are undone. Do you have a human side of you that starts to think, well, this ain't going to go very good?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't help but do that. Now you try to fight through it and try to, and I like to think I am objective, and I base my evaluation on the performance, but it does make a difference.
So then I sit down and I've got this logbook audit form that I've put together, and I've spent some time on it. And before you have to do the Checkride, you're checking these things if it's a Part 61 student. And I clearly have it all lined out, and I show you, here's my 40 hours of flight time, here's my 10 hours or here's my night and my 10 in landings, and I go through that, and it's really organized. You probably have a mindset of, this is going to go better than most because I'm prepared, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Do those things in the preparation leading up to those days. We talk about the knowledge exam a lot on this podcast. Don't feel like you have to go take that 6 months before you take your Checkride. Wait till the last couple weeks. Go knock out that knowledge exam. Go over the missed items with your instructor, and be ready for that to be part of the oral exam with your DPE. And then we flew at the same. I was lucky. My DP and I scheduled a flight 3:00 in the afternoon, and 99% of my flights had been at 3:00 in the afternoon. But you brought a good point up before we started recording. If these students are doing mock check rides and everything at a certain time of day, and then their check rides at a different time of day, they probably should go fly at that time of day at that airport at least.
Yeah.
So they're not surprised.
Yeah, I would venture to say that when an NFL team is preparing for the Super Bowls usually start at weird times, like
5:35 or something.
Yeah. I'll bet the days leading up to that Super Bowl, I'll bet they're practicing at that exact time of the day.
Warming up at 4:30, getting dressed, and doing a dress rehearsal, everything.
And where I see this happening, it's usually in unusual circumstances. Me personally, I schedule check rides at either 8 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and if I only have one check ride that day, I usually try to do it at 10 in the morning. So we're either usually flying about 10 a.m., 12 noon, or 3 p.m., sort of. But there are circumstances where I may have a morning check ride that discontinues because of weather, and I say, well, hey, I can get you in next Thursday, but I need to do it early. We need to be trying to get in the air about 7 a.m., and the applicant is agreeable to it, so we show up next Thursday at 7 in the morning, and we're taking off, and I'll hear a lot, wow, I've never seen this view of the airport with the sun like this, or coming back to the airport. I've never flown directly into the sun coming back to the airport. So there can be some different challenges at different times of the day, and maybe
some towers may be closed that are normally open.
Exactly, you're used to a tower at airport, and at 7 a.m. in the morning here, there's no tower.
DPs probably love that because they get to ask new questions and trick us and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I can say that because I'm looking at him smiling, but there's the DPE. There is a DPE out there that loves to take off at a towered field that the tower's not in operation and ask, what type of airspace are we in now? What's happening? What's the rules different? Just to try and throw some poor private student off. The other thing, we've mentioned this before, but log into IACRA the day or two before. Make sure your password's not about to expire. Make sure you know your password. Be really, really prepared. Those are all the things that I would think about leading up to it. Go learn the maintenance logbooks. Go tab those logbooks out. Make sure you're ready. Make sure you can do it for a different aircraft. Quite often, if you fly to flight school, that aircraft that you plan to fly could be down, and you might have to make a last-minute change, assuming you want to get finished. And if it's a like product, you might have to go look at different maintenance logbooks. Do those things. Recently, someone took the airworthiness certificate out of a plane to show DPE, please do not do that for whatever plane you're in. Take a picture of it, make sure that the DPE knows you've looked at it, and then go look at it right before your flight. But don't remove those from the aircraft, as it's an operating flight school that needs those things to stay in those aircraft for sure.
Yeah, and it's real easy to say, well, I'm going to put it right back, but then you're in the flight school and someone talks to you and
you put it down to scan it and you forget to take it out of the scanner. And oh, Lord, we've seen it all around here. But don't do that. So now it's the big day. And I remember, I'm sure we all have a memory of that big day. These are major milestones in our flying careers, right? So I come to the flight school. I'm in our exam room. I'm ready to go. I've got everything pretty well organized. What I wish I knew then what I know now is I could have even been a lot better organized. Of course, I had my flight plan and all that stuff, but I think it was a part of me that said, keep it hidden until he asks for it, because I didn't want him to see anything that might make him ask me another question. But it would have been wise to have a notebook of all the things that I should have had, all the picture of registration, picture of airworthiness, my driver's license, my student pilot certificate, on and on and on. I think you could put together something really, really nice to make that even look and be more professional, to set the tone for that oral conversation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could remember my private pilot checkride. I'm just sitting here thinking of how dumb I must have been on my private pilot checkride. I wish I had a videotape or a recording or something of it. It was May 7th, 1982, so we're coming up on almost 40 years.
Yep.
So
the thing I remember was obviously being nervous as heck, and I got a text message from my instructor about halfway through the oral. His office was less than 6 feet through 2 pieces of sheetrock from where I was answering questions. And I think his text message said something to the effect of, talk less, listen more. And I think I was trying to show off. And what I didn't know then was I didn't know what it really meant for a man to be retired from the airlines with 30,000 hours of flight time. Like I figured I was almost on even playing field with him at my 68 hours of flight time. I don't know how stupid I had to be to think that, but I didn't think he was going to know a whole lot more than me. Boy, was I wrong, right? And that sounds so stupid right now saying it out loud, but I figured he was going to be a little bit more knowledgeable than me, that he could take a test, right? And I was comparing myself to a consultant that was in technology that would teach another consultant in technology. That I just had those two playing fields way off, right? So, but this man had flown, I don't know how many type ratings you'd think a guy like that has. How many small aircraft has he flown? How many different Cessna 172s has he flown? I'm talking to you. You have more check rides than I do hours of flight time. I was so ignorant, but I think I was trying to show off. Do you sense sometimes that someone's trying to wordsmith you like they're the Chuck Yeager of United Flight Systems?
Absolutely, and I when I'm trying to tell people how to take a check ride, I don't do this in a check ride, but when when people are asking me, I just say ATQ, answer the question. If you're asked a yes or no question, answer it with yes or no. Because so many times applicants dig a rabbit hole, and I'll go down the rabbit hole with you. But sometimes we don't like what we get when we get down in the rabbit hole. So, just answer the question and think about your answer. Now, I will say this, a lot of what I do is scenario based, and I explain to the applicant that I'm going to ask you a lot of questions that are going to have multiple right answers. And some of the right answers are answers that I haven't even considered. And that's okay. So, it's going to be okay. If in this scenario, what would you do? And, well, I might turn around, I might continue, I might divert. They're all three acceptable answers. They're all right. Okay, well, we're going to divert. Okay, let's talk about that. Where are we going to go? What about this airport? All right, well, while we're here, what's the runway length? What's the airport elevation? What are the frequencies that we need to talk on? So we're going to, it's going to morph from a systems problem to all right, well, let's talk about how to read the sectional chart. So, and I tell the applicants in their brief, I say, don't answer it the way you think I want you to answer it. Answer it the way you would do it. The real world, how would you do it?
Yeah, I think that's where I go to the aeronautical knowledge thought process of what we collectively do to become good pilots. And it's the knowledge that I didn't have, and you said yourself you weren't probably that smart back in those days, was really those practical things that were going to help me fly to places and land places and do things in places that I thought it was all about landing safely, the emergency landing, which in the grand scheme of things, it may save your life one day, but how many times out of those 55,000 pilots, how many of them have had to truly execute an emergency landing this year? Probably not that many.
Right.
Well, less than 1% for
Right.
sure. But how many of them have had to fly to an airport they've never landed at before and find it while they're flying over there?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of practical things that I think makes better pilots. But there's not an ACS line item for find your first airports you've never flown to, right?
Right.
It's Dead Reckoning and other things that are supposed to help us apply these skills.
Yeah.
But the aeronautical knowledge that I didn't have on Checkride Day is really everything I need today as I'm a pilot. So try to incorporate that as much as you can in all of your training, but realize there's probably some really, really important stuff that's not part of the ACS that makes us really, really good pilots.
I've heard on check rides multiple times one of the scenarios that'll present to cause a diversion is a medical emergency, and the applicant may say, "Well, there's this airport and it's 7 miles away, and there's another airport that's 15 miles away, and I've never been to the 7 mile away airport, so I'm going to go to the 15 mile away airport." And I just use the analogy. I say, okay, you and I are driving down the road. In my car, I'm driving, and you tell me you're having a heart attack, and we're passing a hospital. And I say, well, I've never been to that hospital. I'm going to go to the hospital that's 10 minutes away. What are you going to think about that? I think you would want me to take you to this ER that's right here.
Yeah, and the funny thing is as we continue to learn and become better pilots, airports are all very, very similar. They all have hopefully asphalt or concrete.
Yep.
They got some similar striping, and they look about the same. And it should be fairly quick to find out how long the runways are, and do you have your performance numbers in your head. I today, 500 hours in, am not the least bit concerned about going to any airport and trying to land at that airport because I know how to prepare myself. I know how to look. I know how to see, is there an obstacle that I need to avoid at the end of the runway? Is there a wide enough runway for my personal minimums? And it doesn't scare me to go anymore. But man, day after check ride, I guarantee you I did not go to an airport that I had never landed at.
Yeah.
And I get that anxiety, but yes, if I'm having a heart attack, please get to the closest one.
Yeah.
Unless there's one right next to a hospital that's like 1 more mile away, then take me to that one so that the ambulance can get to me a little faster.
Yeah.
Other than the being prepared and being more prepared and maybe shutting my mouth and listening to the question and just answering the question, the oral was I think I was prepared for the oral, but I don't know that I knew everything I was saying. We joke about systems a lot on this podcast, but I memorized, that I had an E083 engine from Lycoming, and at that time I didn't know what any of that meant. I knew that I had a fixed pitch prop, and I knew the length of that prop, but I don't know that I knew why that was important to understand and know until much later. And if you're memorizing those things and you don't understand them, you might want to challenge yourself to seek out the real answers of why that's important, because it is, now looking back, it's more important than a lot of the things I did understand and know. So we exited the oral, and I'm excited because I'm assuming that I'm done with that piece. And I think he even said you've passed this piece. Go out to the plane, do my pre-flight like I've never pre-flighted before. He's observing me. I remember saying some things in the pre-flight that I shouldn't have said. ATQ, answer the question. I would also say don't volunteer anything that's not being asked of you to volunteer, right?
Yeah.
But I was trying to show off, right? I was trying to point out things that I observed, but probably was stupid if it wasn't an airworthiness problem or a safety problem. So don't ad lib and add extra stuff unless asked. And then I was so process oriented that day that I got in the cockpit and I did all the things I was supposed to do. He got in the cockpit and he didn't close the door. And I was like, "Sir, you need to close your door. We need to do our passenger briefing." And he was like, "Captain, I'll close the door when I want to close the door." I was like, "Okay, yes, sir." And I didn't know if it was part of the trick, part of the test. Like, am I supposed to wrestle this guy to close his door? Am I supposed to reach over? And again, the level of respect he commanded, you weren't going to reach around him and close the door. So I asked, as long as it's not part of you testing my pilot skills, I've asked you and you're doing that and you're going to own that, right? Like, I wanted to clarify that. And he said, "Captain, you're right. I'll close the door when I'm ready." We were both pretty big boys. So I went through the rest of the stuff and I start the plane and I listen to ATIS and I write the ATIS down. And again, super fair gentleman, probably wanted me to be successful. And I write the ATIS down and I switch to ground and he goes, "What did they say on the ATIS?" And it's echo and the winds are 320 at 16, gusting 31. And I read it all off and he goes, "Would you take your wife up today?" And I said, "Well, no, I probably wouldn't." He goes, You want to fly right now?" I said, "No, sir, I don't want to fly right now. I think we should discontinue." And I looked at my piece of paper. I'm like, what was I thinking? 16 gusting 31. And there was a windsock on the building. Like, I was in the wind on the tarmac. I think I was so much about being a private pilot at that point that all decision making left my brain. And so we came back 2 weeks later. We did the flight. The flight was exactly what was in my gouge, thank goodness. I got thrown off on the emergency landing where I actually cleaned the plane up and was going to take off again. And he was like, "I didn't tell you to take off again." And again, I think that's where I was going through rhythms and practice and not really doing my thing. But rest of the flight went good. We probably did a very similar check ride where we did the landings at a remote airport, and then we did some VOR and hood work and did the unusual attitudes and the high work and the low work. And coming back, I still don't know if I passed. And I think I was so worried about passing that I lost my mind a little bit on what I was doing again. And I think you got to perform at your best. To perform at your best, you got to be thinking that you are doing a good job and are doing your best. I'm sure you have millions of stories, Wally, but share one of them with us where maybe things weren't going good. What should a private candidate do if they're not doing a good job that day? Maybe it's too windy. Maybe they're in the air and they got too windy. Any advice that you would give a future applicant for another DPE, something to put in their quiver to think about?
Well, you as an applicant, it is your call. You can discontinue at any point. So even if you get out in the air and you realize, and I've had this occasionally. It usually doesn't happen. Usually once you're in the air, you finish. But there have been times where we've gotten up in the air. We've just after takeoff, the applicant will say, "Hey, yeah, this wind is way out of my comfort zone. I think I'd like to discontinue, and we can come back, and we can come back another day." But you've got to have you've got to be able to compartmentalize to an extent of if you make a mistake, you now have to try to manage that mistake. And I don't notice, I don't even say fix the mistake, because sometimes you can't, but manage the mistake and move forward, because the airplane is moving forward. So look forward. You can't really look behind you and try to, I keep going back to use the word pout. You can't pout about it.
Yeah, and then the exhilaration of knowing that I did pass. You're walking in. This is, again, a man that commands respect. I don't think I said, did I pass? But somewhere between the outside and him walking up to a computer saying, hand me your student pilot certificate, I realized he was doing something to give me my real pilot certificate. And it was exciting. I knew I had accomplished a big goal, and I was elated. And then a lot of other little things that people just don't teach us came to mind. Do I ask him to sign my logbook? Was I PIC? I know he said I was PIC, but how do I log it? And a lot of this stuff really isn't taught to us as private pilot candidates. And he said, I'll sign your logbook if you want me to, but it really wasn't dual received, but I'll put my name in there with you. And I had him sign my logbook because I felt like that was the right thing to do. But do you sign people's logbooks? Do you tell them you will or won't? What's your philosophy on that?
If they want, I tell them this is PIC time. You could just write in there, Checkride complete, Checkride passed, yay, hurrah, whatever you want. It's your logbook. And I'd say 25% ask to sign it. More people are more concerned about taking a picture than they are having me sign their logbook.
Well, that's the next thing. I asked him to take a picture, and so he was a no. He didn't want to take a picture that day, and I don't remember all his reasonings, but I've heard some DPs say I don't take pictures for XY reasons, and a lot of DPs do take pictures. I don't think even a person that was a no would care if you asked them to take a picture. They're not going to hold it against you, but they're going to say no, thank you. I don't want to do that today. Yeah. But I think the picture is important. I think the picture with the CFI is also important. It was not too long ago where someone passed the check right here, and the student and the DP took a picture. I think it was you for a candidate. And then like a couple hours later, the CFI showed up and said to my dispatch team, my operations team, he said, hey, I would like to go take a picture. And she said, nah, don't worry about it. We already got one with the DPE. And I said, he didn't say he was helping you take the picture. He wants a picture for himself. It's his pride and joy that passed today. I think the CFI wanted the picture with the candidate, not just the candidate with the CFI. So
I think the CFI picture is more important. The CFI is the person that did the work. I just happened to be here on this day, and I called it. I was the referee. The CFI is the player.
No question. And I'm telling the listeners that if you omit your CFI from taking a picture with you, you might be pissing someone off, because it just might be the CFI that cares more about the picture than you do.
Yeah.
And you might want to check in on that a little bit and make sure. So again, successful day. Had a new piece of paper, piece of plastic on the way, a couple pictures to hang on the wall and celebrate. And it was kind of deflating. Once it was over, it was over. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't have a plan. I had a reservation for the next day so I could fly as a private pilot, but it was kind of a overwhelming sigh of relief that then there was nothing. And that's, I think, what happens to a lot of people when they run their first marathon. They do something for the first time. They're like, well, now what? I've put in all this effort. Now what? And it was shortly thereafter that I thought I'd start doing some more training to be a better pilot and work on other things. And I think that's the bug that we all have in aviation, and keep going and going and going.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you're about to take a check ride, this show provided you a lot of insight, a lot of best practices and tips. If you're in the Houston area, don't hesitate to call upon Wally to do your check ride if you need a check ride. And if you're looking for a good place to go to school, come see us at United Flight Systems. As always, fly safe and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.